Shalom. Shalom and welcome to a Wider Brunch. My name is Ron Wazell, and I'm on the board of a Wider Bridge and its treasurer. Together with Rabbi Camille Shira Angel, we're pleased to be on the host committee of this event. I invite you all to please be seated and enjoy your meal. The program will begin in 15 minutes. And now some words of blessing from Rabbi Angel.
Thank you, Ron. Many of you have already said your own hamotzi. This being a first-time event, we can definitely say a shehechianu blessing. And to these blessings and prayers, I offer words of aspiration for our Wider Bridge gathering. Amidst the world's relentless roar and the constant pressure for our attention, we give thanks to a Wider Bridge for exciting our hopefulness and for bringing us together today to demonstrate our commitment and support tangibly for Israel. In these all too short hours, may we find moments of real inspiration, moments in which our mind sees what our souls already know, that each of us is but one unique, sacred part of an awesome, infinitely greater reality, and that by expanding our reach, joining together, widening our bridge, we create real connections and friendships between GLBTQ Jews around the world and Israel. Wow, I haven't said that acronym in like 6 months. With Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, we thank God mightily for bringing forth bread from the earth. So too, we are grateful for the gifts of sustenance that come forth when a visionary leader prioritizes his passion for making an impactful relationship between Israel and our community of Jews and friends worldwide. Thank you, Arthur Slepian. Thank you to Ty Gregory and everyone on the staff and board of a Wider Bridge. Thank you to our honored guests and to each of us for coming with a wide and open heart. Amen.
היא מרגישה שנפתח לה מזל, פגשה אחד גבר ורז'ל, והיא תלחש לו, מה היא תלחש לו? קח אותי על הגמל. I'm your beauty, you're my beast, welcome to the Middle East. תל אביב, יא חביבי תל אביב, תסתכל כמה לירדים מסביב, עושים לי היי היי בלילה וואי וואי, וסחטן על תל אביב. תל אביב יא חביבי תל אביב, תסתכל כמה לירדים מסביב, עושים לי היי היי בלילה וואי וואי, וסחטן על תל אביב.
Good afternoon and welcome to a Wider Brunch. As you can probably already tell from the opening video, things are going to be just a little bit different today. As we've been joking, this is not your bubby's brunch. But I want to welcome all of you for coming this afternoon and taking time out of this gorgeous Indian summer day to be with us. And as a reminder, this event is being broadcast live around the world. So for everyone from Israel to New York to Chicago and around the world, thank you for tuning in. Our brunch today is in celebration of 5 years of the work of a Wider Bridge, building LGBT connections to Israel. And it's fitting that it's here today in San Francisco, not only because it's where the organization began, but because of the vibrant LGBT history here and the Jewish history here. And what began as a local effort in San Francisco has evolved into an international movement of LGBT leaders and communities to choose to engage and understand Israel. We have a great program for you in store, but I want to give a few shout-outs in the room. State Senator Mark Leno is with us. Thank you for being here. Supervisor and candidate for the California State Senate, Scott Wiener, is here. Thank you both for your leadership. And I also want to introduce Ravit Ber, the new Deputy Consul General from Israel to the Pacific Northwest. Ravit, welcome to our community. Welcome to the Foggy City. So we're going to have some fun today, but I also want to recognize that this is indeed a difficult time for our friends back in Israel. The needless cycle of violence that we see happening on the ground is deeply troubling and disturbing. So we hope that people, communities, and leaders on all sides will pursue a path of cooperation and mutual understanding so that we can move towards calm and in a direction of peace. To our friends watching in Israel today, please stay safe. Our hearts are with you, and we all know that Israel's best days are still ahead. And so with that, I want to introduce our host today. I first met Vincent Jones at Ben Gurion Airport about a year ago on our 2014 mission. Vincent is an incredible advocate for the African American and the LGBT communities in Los Angeles. And since returning from Israel with us, he's been an advocate for the pro-Israel community as well. He's been an incredible voice for a Wider Bridge and engaging LGBT communities with Israel. And I'm proud to say that as of a week ago, Vincent Jones is now a member of the Wider Bridge Board of Directors. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of a Wider Brunch, Vincent Jones.
Hello, everybody. Shalom. Hello. Hello, are you guys there? Okay. So I know this is not church, but it is Sunday, and in my church tradition, there's a call and response. So we're in this together, okay? All right. So again, as Ty said, you know this is a talk show, right? Okay. You're the live studio audience. So as Ty said, you're at a Wider Brunch live. It's not Memorex. We are live, and I love saying that because it reminds me. It makes me feel like I'm Diana Ross or like Barbra Streisand or something at a special concert, like Diana Ross live in New York or Barbra Streisand live from some city somewhere in the world, wherever she wants to be. But although I might be a little bit of a diva, I'm not Diana Ross and I'm not Barbra Streisand, but you are at a Wider Brunch live. So let's get serious for 1 second here. I have a very serious question. By a show of hands, who thought that a Wider Bridge was a clever name for a construction company when you first heard the name? Am I the only one? Okay. So, but seriously, when I first heard the name, I really had no idea what the group is all about. I'm not Jewish. That might be a surprise. I'm not Jewish. I didn't go to Hebrew school. I didn't have a bar mitzvah, although when I found out what that was, I was a little mad that I didn't have one. But not being Jewish, I didn't know about this teaching about the world being a narrow bridge. And so the whole concept of this organization trying to make that bridge a little wider was lost on me. But then I learned a little bit more. And I still couldn't help but wonder, why not call it something simpler, like Queers for Israel, or parents and friends of LGBTQ Jews who want them to meet a Jewish doctor to marry. But one day I really got it. I remember the precise moment. It was October, last October actually. We were literally walking in the desert. It was, the moon and the stars were bright. Yuval, who's here, was singing and playing the guitar. I was surrounded by a bunch of former strangers who were quickly becoming friends as we were walking through the desert holding candles. And I realized that a Wider Bridge is building and constructing something. It's building relationships and constructing a movement. And that's when I really understood what a Wider Bridge is all about. And that was just the first night of our mission. I had been to Israel before, so I had an idea of what I would see, but traveling to Israel with a Wider Bridge is a different experience altogether. It's almost like a family vacation, but just not a dysfunctional one. But it's like a family vacation where you meet relatives that you haven't known. You know, we met leaders of just about every single LGBT organization in the country. We met artists, we met TV stars, we met YouTube sensations. Some people may have made friends in a few bars. But it was very clear that the people we met were interested to learn and share with us as we were from them. And it didn't stop when we left Ben Gurion last October. It continued back in the US. A Wider Bridge organized several events in several cities with guests from Israel, many who were on that same trip. And we got to show them our side of the bridge and continue learning from them. And this past June, folks from both sides of the bridge got together again in Tel Aviv for the 40 Years of Pride conference, which just happened to coincide with Pride. Thank you so much, Arthur and Ty, for that. But you know, as I look back over the past year, I look back very proud knowing that I was a part of the team that helped to make the bridge wider. And today you are all part of that as well. But don't just take that from me. Let's look at a video to see for yourself. Roll tape.
To see this mix of ancient culture and modern striving has been a fascinating experience and truly life-changing.
It's an amazing experience to provide a space for people who otherwise would never have met each other, would have never set foot in this country, to really get to see it in their way, on their terms.
I think I have been overwhelmed by the hopefulness of the community here. Open House, Jerusalem, New Spirit, all of these experiences that I have had, the people that I've connected to more than anything, have shown me it is not a closed place and it is not one separated, and hope is possible.
I just have been genuinely moved, impressed, and awed by the various people we've met here, advocates, religious figures, people who've chosen to live in religious contemplation or on a kibbutz. It's been wonderful.
I'm really amazed at how embraced the LGBT community is here. It's very vibrant. We've learned about the history of the country. I'm going to take so much of what I've learned back home.
A Wider Bridge kind of fulfills its name. The bridge often between communities in the United States and here is wide, but sometimes the bridges between communities here in Israel is even wider. So I think that a Wider Bridge is doing a tremendous job at just bringing us together, having us interact in the same spaces so that we can kind of find our mutual understanding.
A Wider Bridge! In traveling around the country, I find a similarity to the experience of exploring self and gender identity. It's complex, it's varied, it's different in different places and different times, and that's exactly what I found here.
I just wanted to tell everybody here how proud I am to join the LGBT community of Israel, kicking off this Pride Week festivities. And we've decorated the U.S. Embassy on the seaside to show you how much we support and are proud of and celebrate the progress that's been achieved here in Israel.
Here's to us for taking chances in our lives. היא מפזרת ענפים קטנים, נכון שבינתיים כמה זה נעים. בלילה וואי וסחטן על תל אביב.
Pride was insane, but I loved it. I've been to Pride in LA, New York, DC, San Francisco. This one was so much better. It's so organic and real. The entire city is there, and if they're not cheering you on from the balcony, they're walking with you. It's magical. It is just magical.
we tend to give into caricatures because it's easier and it's convenient. But the truth is that these people can't be caricatured, and this place can't be caricatured. It is diverse and it is vibrant, and it is filled with people who are yearning to tell the world their story, and I am very privileged to have been able to listen to those stories.
Wasn't that a great video? Oh, it's still going. Sorry about that. But wasn't that a great video? And I love seeing Joe Goldman, who was an intern for me back in Senator Boxer's office many moons ago, and he's a wonderful leader today. And we're joined by two leaders, two stars of the video today. I want to call them out, Alice Kessler and Joe Colarusso. Alice and Joe, come on out. Darling, you gotta fix your mic first. Hold on. There we go. All right. So let's get started here. Alice. I've known Alice for a long time, and I must say she has been responsible for a lot of the legislation that has passed in California over the last several years. As the Ledge Director for Equality California, the California statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization. So thank you for all that work. Now she is continuing that work for a number of organizations in her own firm. But we want to get to your trip to Israel. You had been before, a long time ago, but this was your first time going after a few decades with a Wider Bridge, right?
Not a few.
Okay.
Not that old.
Okay, let's say 1 decade. How about that? Not wink wink. But here's the question: what was different this time about the country?
So it was actually about 20 years ago, give or take, that I was there. I went when I was in high school. It was around 1996, and it was a part of a school project, and I went and stayed with family I had in Israel. They lived at the time on a kibbutz in northern Israel, right on the border of Lebanon. And just to put it in historical context, at that time, right as I arrived, there had been a number of bus bombings. There were also a couple of suicide attacks in Tel Aviv and other places, so tensions were high. And this was also not too long after Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, and the peace process was kind of unraveling. So being 16 years old with family, my family didn't want me to go to some of the more dangerous parts of the country. So while I got to travel around a good deal, went to the Golan Heights and Haifa and Sfat, I didn't go to the Old City, for example. So coming back with a Wider Bridge, I got to really have just a much richer, deeper experience of Israel, including going to the Old City, going to the Kotel. We even did a day trip to the West Bank. So it was, way more engrossed in the culture of Israel than the first time I went. And of course, going and experiencing the country through an LGBT lens was something new for me as well.
Were you out when you came in '96?
No, I wasn't at that time in my life. I think I was a junior in high school, so, it's sort of, coming to terms. And people are coming out much younger nowadays too, so, which is a great thing.
And so what was it like for you as an out person in Israel this time?
Before the trip, I actually had a little bit of trepidation. For example, I remember wondering, do I have to bring a skirt to certain places? And I remember being at home with my wife, and she was like, there's this wrap thing you can get that's kind of like a skirt. Because being, butch of center lesbian, I was not comfortable with having to put on a skirt.
I had the very same worry.
But what I found was my experience of being in Israel as an LGBT person was very similar to how I feel living in California. You have your, gay mecca of Tel Aviv, which is kind of like going to San Francisco or West Hollywood. There's gay neighborhoods and gay clubs, and you have that whole experience. And then you have in Jerusalem a smaller LGBT community, but there are resources there. There's a center. There's one gay bar that we all got to know pretty well on our trip. And
Too well, maybe.
Too well. And that kind of reminded me of Sacramento, where I live. And then
There's a lot of people from Sacramento here.
Yes, no, you guys know what I'm talking about. And then, traveling to other parts of the country, like we went up to the Galilee and we visited a kibbutz where an openly gay man was living with his family, his husband and his 2 children, and on a conservative Jewish kibbutz, living openly, living their lives. And that to me seemed like, other parts of California where there's not this whole enclave, but people are just a part of the fabric of life there. So I was actually surprised that really was very similar, and I think it really underscores that Israel is really a beacon of hope internationally for the LGBT community, being that it's in the Middle East, which is not an easy place to be if you're LGBT.
Right. And Joe, I want to hear about many stories, but I know that you're a lawyer in Brooklyn, and you are able to kind of use stories to advance justice and advance the law. And I imagine in Israel, there were many stories that resonated with you, that you heard or came across. Can you share one?
Sure, absolutely. Some stories should just stay in Israel. Let's start there.
Yes.
But when we visited Sfat, there was one of the group leaders told us a story when we were at a temple that really resonated with me. And it was written by a Nobel laureate, S.Y. Agnon, and it's a fable about a goat. And there's this old man, and he's dying. And the town doctors say, you need to get a goat and drink its milk. So he does. But this goat disappears every night. And the old man is befuddled. He wants to know where this goat is going, because every time it comes back, its udders are filled with the richest milk he's ever tasted. So he enlists his beloved son to tie a rope around the goat and follow it one night. And the son does. And it takes him to this cave. And on the other side of the cave is the land of Israel. And it's a land of plenty, and it's a land that he's never seen so much green, and it's surrounded by mountains. And the people there tell him, if you leave, you can't come back. So he writes a note, and he puts it in the goat's ear, and he sends the goat back to his father. But when the goat returns, the father is so beset with grief that he's lost his son. He's convinced his son has died, and he believes that the only way he can assuage this terrible feeling is to butcher the goat, is to do violence to this goat. And only after the goat is killed does the butcher discover the note in the goat's ear that would have directed his father and the rest of his family to the land of Israel, but the father can never get there. And I think that the really important moral from that story is that we be wary of not multiplying our own grief by reacting too quickly to situations that certainly warrant grief and that certainly warrant anger, but that require of us reflection and care. And I think that was a story that really just sat with me the entire time. And so I was very grateful to have heard it.
And similarly, first of all, it's an amazing story. And so similarly, were there things you saw in Israel that resonated with you in a similar way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the real take-home for me was how much everyone just wants to live their life in peace and wants a place in which they can thrive. And from marching in the parade and meeting wonderful men and women who really look at Israel as their safe place, and realize as well that they have to be very careful not to alienate natural allies. And you can alienate natural allies, and many people spoke to this. Particularly, we heard a gentleman who grew up in Israel right around the time of the founding, and he lived with his partner of many, many years. And he was asked over and over again about the discrimination that he faced in the early years of his life. And he said, it was the way that it was. And you survive, and you learn to live with the way that things are. And he approached things in a very practical way, and he reached out to people in a very practical way that wasn't aggressive, it wasn't nasty, it wasn't mean-spirited. It was, I'm here, and I am who I am. And once society caught up with him, he became such a beacon, such a wonderful storyteller of his experience and of the experience of others. And I mean, we were all in tears. The man was so lovely. So I think that that's really a big takeaway, is that the people, especially in the LGBT community there, understand that progress takes time, progress is painstaking, but we have to greet every challenge, and we have to greet violence against our identities, against our authentic selves, with grace instead of with vengeance.
Yeah. I wish Joe was a candidate for office right now instead of some of the people we have up there. It was great. Thank you, Joe. Coming back to this side of the bridge, question for Alice. So I know I had a lot of my social justice activist friends give me a hard time when I got back from Israel. But one of the things that I got from the Wider Brunch trip was an opportunity to get some of the questions that I had answered for myself, so I felt more confident to be able to engage in conversations with some of my friends and colleagues when I got back. I imagine your story is similar. Has it been? And can you share some of your reactions to those conversations?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel the same way as you do. I mean, I think before going on this trip, I often just didn't want to engage with people on the question of Israel, and I didn't feel like I had the tools to even have the conversation about, well, Israel is an oppressive regime and it's violating human rights, and I just didn't want to have that conversation. And I mentioned earlier I have family there, and so for me, I have a stake in it. It's not just being a bystander. But going on the trip, I definitely think I developed those tools between the people we met there from all sides of the issue, and there's incredible diversity of thought within Israel. Talking with Arab Israelis, talking with Palestinians on the trip, talking with the American Jews that were on the trip with me who were so knowledgeable. I kept joking on the trip that like Joe Goldman, who I know is out there somewhere, was like my go-to encyclopedia of Israeli information, and Lori with the Wider Brunch just knew so much from having grown up around Orthodox Judaism, and so there was just this real wealth of information. And doing my own reading and my own contemplation, I feel like I've come back and I can have that conversation. I don't have the answers, and I don't think anyone does, but I feel that I can engage, and I have the firsthand experience and those tools to have the conversation, which is always a difficult one.
And so, Joe, like me, you're not Jewish.
That's correct. Unfortunately.
But if I didn't know you, that would be surprising, because you're definitely the trip with the Wider Brunch seems to have resonated with you.
It did.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, why does it? Like, what about it resonates with you so much?
Well, I mean, I think the first and foremost, as a gay man, I mean, growing up in, and I can't even imagine what it would have been like to grow up earlier than I did, but even in the time that I was growing up, the sense that you are always an other, that you are always under attack, that you're just looking for a peace, for a space in which you can live your authentic life. I think it really resonated with me that the state of Israel is a refuge. And a refuge that I longed for in my own private life, and I've long searched for a home. And so the idea that this was a home for people who, everywhere else they have been, are under attack for who they are, was very important to me and hit me very deeply.
So, Alice, last question for you. What has changed for you since returning from Israel?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it was actually, even though this was an LGBT-focused trip, for me, it was really more of a connection with my Jewish identity. I've always sort of felt that that's just one part of who I am, and it's not, a central part of who I am, but I feel going to Israel and understanding how, people from throughout a diaspora under the most challenging of circumstances, came together and built this democratic Jewish homeland and basically prevented the Jewish people from being erased from history is so inspiring, and it shows the resilience and the innovation of my people, and I feel very proud to be a part of that people. And so I definitely feel much more connected as a Jew coming back from the trip. So I'm just really grateful to a Wider Bridge for having that experience.
It's amazing listening to your stories what a week in Israel with a Wider Bridge can do if you're Jewish or non-Jewish. Thank you both for your leadership. Thank you both for sharing your stories here today. Let's give it up for Joe and Alice. And as a special treat for all of you, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, we have Israeli recording star to sing a song for us, Ido Politi. Ido, come on out.
Thank you. יום אחד זה יקרה בלי שנרגיש משהו ישתנה, משהו יירגע בנו, משהו ייגע בנו ולא יהיה ממה לחשוש. וזה יבוא כמו קו חרוט על כף יד, זה יבוא בטוח בעצמו, כאילו היה שם תמיד וחיכה שנבחין בו. וזה יבוא, אתה תראה, הידיים הקפוצות יתארחו והלב השומר לא להיפגע יפעם בקצב רגיל. זה יבוא כמו שהטבע רגיל להיות שלם עם עצמו. יום אחד זה יקרה בלי שנרגיש משהו ישתנה, משהו יירגע בנו, משהו ייגע בנו ולא יהיה ממה לחשוש. וזה יבוא כמו קו חרוט על כף יד, זה יבוא בטוח בעצמו, כאילו היה שם תמיד וחיכה שנבחין בו. וזה יבוא, אתה תראה, הידיים הקפוצות יתארחו והלב השומר לא להיפגע יפעם בקצב רגיל. זה יבוא כמו שהטבע רגיל, אתה תראה, הידיים הקפוצות יתארחו והלב השומר לא להיפגע יפעם בקצב רגיל. זה יבוא כמו שהטבע רגיל להיות שלם. וזה יבוא כשלא הכל יטלטל אותנו ולא הכל יקם, ומה שיפתח לנו מחכה. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Let's give it up again for Ido Politi. And keeping with the theme, people from Israel, now I want to invite up two of the people who were with us in Israel for our trip. Zeharit Selek. Oop, I said that wrong. I'm sorry. Zeharit, hold on here. I'll get my notes. Zeharit Sarek and Anat Nir. Come on up. Hello. Hello. Shalom. Hello. All right, so good to see you again.
Thank you.
And I love this outfit here, I must say.
Thank you very much.
So, okay. So there was there's a little bit of music that just played. That I don't know if you heard. Can you play that song again? Let's play it again. DJ, play it again, please.
Please.
Oh, no? Come on. Go.
It's a very good one.
Okay, cut. So I understand that this is a song that might not be expected at an event like this. Why is
Right.
that?
What we heard now, the song is called Mashiach. It's a very popular song in the religious community. And when we are the LGBT religious community, when we walking on the gay parade, we marching with these songs, Hasidic songs. And people in the LGBT community in Israel, they're not religious. So they kind of surprised to hear a religious song in a gay parade. And for ours, it's like a combination of our identity. It's a bridge between our religious identity and the gay identity. So I like this song.
So speaking of parades, on a more somber note, you were in Jerusalem for Pride recently, where a teenage girl, Shira Banki, and several others were stabbed and wounded. What was that experience like, and how has it impacted the community?
I will tell you a story.
Okay.
Like, as a religious woman, in the Bible, in the Genesis, is written that God created the world with words. He actually didn't do something to create the world. He used his mouth. He used his words to create things. God says, will be a light, and there was a light. God says, we'll be in the sea, and we had a sea. So we learn from God that you can create a world with your words. And I think that some rabbinic forget that. And they speaking and say words against the LGBT community. And I think those rabbinic need to learn and to understand that you can ruin a word. For example, the Banki's family, her world will destroyed by words of these rabbinic people. But I want to say something optimistic. We're in the LGBT religious community, we try to change that. So we try to make a dialogue, to make those words to be more good words. So we talk, and we went to school, and we talk with this, some rabbinic liberal ones, and we use words to change the world.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So aside from, in addition to using words to change the world, you're also creating spaces for observantly Jewish and out and proud gay people. What was it like to have been a leader of that movement a decade ago, and how things changed?
I grew up in an Orthodox Zionist family in Jerusalem. And when I was a teenager, everybody used to ask me, are you Sephardic or are you Ashkenazi? Are you religious or are you secular? And when I grew up, they asked me, are you going to be a mother or you want a career? And the last 10 years, people keeping asking me, are you religious or are you a lesbian? So listen, people, I'm not or that, I'm both.
Yeah.
We are all like that. We're both. We're complicated people, right? So if you ask rabbinic people 10 years ago, there is LGBT in every place, also in your community, they make faces and no, in my community, no, there is not such a thing. And in those days, we're talking to them and we try to have the change that I talking before. And when I talking about leading, it's to create places that we can be accepted and to feel belong. So that's a place that I feel most nice.
And having had Shabbat dinner in the community, I can say that I definitely felt welcome and that I belong, even not being Jewish and not being a conservative Jew. So thank you. Another question for you. So you just joined the board of the Agudah, Israel's National LGBTQ Task Force. We've been talking a little bit about some progress over the past decade. What is something that the Aguda is working on today?
I think for the LGBT community in Israel to really progress, what we want to do in the next few years is close the gap between our legal state and the civic society, meaning, you know, our situation is good by the law, or better than in many other countries in the world. We're one of the most progressed countries in the world. But our society is still very conservative. A lot of little societies within Israel that are not being accepted. A lot of youth that are being thrown out of their homes. And we have a lot of organizations rising and being built for, you know, helping our community. So we still need to do a lot of work within the civic society for acceptance. That's one thing. The other thing I would say is solidarity, is our ability to be patient not only to our needs, but to other communities in need in Israel, because the LGBT community in Israel, like other places in the world, is quite a stronger community. We're more in communications, we have organizations, we have structures, and some other communities, like for instance, we just had the Ethiopian community have a big uprising in Tel Aviv, and we didn't see the LGBT community supporting. And I would love to see Aguda being involved in these situations of solidarity between communities.
Yeah, great. You know, we're having some of those same issues here in the U.S., and I think, you know, and listening to both of you talk, you know, especially about being able to marry religion and a queer identity, or to have solidarity with other movements that are perceived to be other, but you can be, in Israel, you can be queer and you can also be Ethiopian, or you can be lesbian and religious.
Yes, I can.
Yes, and yes, you are. Yes. So, you know, so that's another way where I just see there's so many connections between our communities. No question, I also see a connection between the nightlife. I mean, Tel Aviv is, how many of you guys have been in Tel Aviv? For a show of hands.
Wow.
Wow, a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those of you guys who have not been in Tel Aviv, I recommend it. The beaches are amazing. I like the boys there too. The women are amazing too. The food is great. It is become known as one of the great centers in the world for LGBT life and nightlife. And you've been a big part in making that happen. Thank you. Thank you. But I'd love for you to tell the audience some of the things you've done to help make that happen.
I'm not sure I'm the only one who helped that happen. There's a big group of people who made that happen, but I'm happy to be a part of this process. A lot of that has to do with the campaign for LGBT tourism that we did with the Ministry of Tourism and the Municipality of Tel Aviv that I was co-chairing with Shai Deutsch. And of course, I've been involved in the Tel Aviv cultural life for many years, not only Tel Aviv, also the rest of Israel. Women parties, festivals. One thing I can share is a film festival we started. We started it 8 years ago. When I go back to Israel, we will celebrate our 8th year. It's a lesbian film festival called Lethal Lesbian, which is like Lethal Weapon. It was supposed to be some sort of joke when we began because we didn't know it was about to turn into a film festival. So we started as a film night because we saw a lot of the work of our friends, the directors, Israeli directors who direct lesbian films, being showed in Sundance Festival and abroad, but not in Israel. So that was absurd, and we wanted to make something happen. We wanted to see our stories on the silver screen. So we started this film night, and it was sold out, and we started this film festival, and then people told us, you know, it's such a niche, and maybe you won't get supported by film funds because you have such a funky name, and 8 years later, we have film funds supporting us. We are still a sold-out event. We have features that are produced by our support in Israel. And we're proudly presenting lesbian cinema in Israel, which is wonderful. So that's one example.
I love it. Maybe that can be the next thing you bring to the U.S. on another Wider Bridge trip.
Maybe.
Yes, Arthur and Ty, you guys hear that? So my last question to you both. You know, each of you have played a role in fortifying the bridge. A Wider Bridge has brought ECUs here to North America, and you've been a part of sharing your community and your experience on the missions in Israel. Zaharit, we'll start with you. You're one of the first speakers a Wider Bridge brought back to the U.S. in 2010, and you've hosted myself and others at many missions and Orthodox Shul Yahad. What value does a Wider Bridge bring to you and the Yahad community?
Okay, yes, I was here in 2010, and I was. It was great to come here. It was my first time, and with a Wider Bridge. And when I came here, I realized that I'm not alone. That we share the same stories. We share the same struggle. And in one of the events, a woman came to me and she told me, you know, in your story, you told us that you felt that you are the only lesbian religious in the world. And I felt the same. And in that moment, I understand that this woman and I am sharing the same story. And I understand that together is more powerful. And when Wider Bridge bring the group to Yahad, it's Orthodox synagogue in Tel Aviv. It's actually my synagogue. And I go to pray there every Shabbat. And we established that because we want to feel belong to the religious community. And when we established this synagogue, I didn't thought that it will be something unusual because I'm part of a community and we are straight and gay people together. We are approximately 40% gays in this synagogue. And when a Wider Bridge came to Israel, we hosted them in a Shabbat dinner in Yahad. And one of the men in the last tour told me, you know what amazing? To see those kids in the straight families, they grew up to an equal society. They don't make a difference between gay people or straight people because everybody here are acceptance and equal. So it's amazing to see the young generation growing to this community. And for myself, I have so much powerful from these trips, and I understood that I need to make a change bigger than to be just in a social groups. So for example, in the last election that we had in Israel, I was candidate by Yesh Atid party for the parliament. So I think when I'm going to the parliament or the Knesset in Israel, I want to make a change, not also in the society, also in the law. So I know just one thing, I'm not alone. Because of Wider Bridge, I know that I have a friend around the world that support us in Israel and support LGBT Jewish in Israel, and it makes me happy, it makes me stronger.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah. And Anat, you co-led last year's mission, or this year's mission, correct, in Israel?
Right.
With, there were what, 25 people?
About 25.
About 25 very diverse North American leaders, LGBT leaders. Why does it matter to bring North American LGBT people into engagement with Israel and your community?
Well, I think a Wider Bridge has such a big influence. One thing is the trip. I'm not sure if it affected them or me in a way. I will go to the personal in a second. I just want to say that it's an opportunity because we've been coming here and it's opened up so much opportunities for connection. I know so many people that have come here today, and this has to do a lot with the Wider Bridge's work because I've met these people through a Wider Bridge. And I work for organizations in Israel, not only cultural work, also legislative work and organizational work and community leadership. It has a lot to do with community building, and it's international community, which is what Zaharit is talking about. And I think bringing people in Israel helps you know, getting a first-hand experience, of course, and learning the issues that are most, I don't know, that are the biggest issues in our society through an LGBTQ lens. That's a very powerful lens to look at social justice through. For me, being secular, and I think maybe secular people don't feel like the speakers before me said, you know, now I feel like I can engage in the dialogue better. Right. And I feel like the secular people in Israel are maybe not considered as Jewish, as Zionist, and I feel like the work with the Wider Brunch on the personal level has brought me to reclaim Judaism, to be a part of this community, to reclaim Zionism, to be a part of this community of wanting to build a society that is a good society, a strong society. So that's a big influence that the Wider Brunch had on me personally, and I think it's an opportunity for our communities to connect, which is an amazing thing and an optimistic thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, a wider bridge is definitely creating a vehicle to expand the bridge, but it wouldn't actually expand without leaders like you both leading the charge. So thank you both. But before you leave, I want to call Arthur to the stage. Arthur Slepian, a Wider Brunch Executive Director.
Let's have a shout out for Vincent Jones, our amazing host.
Oh, thank you.
Zoharit, Anat, would you join me here? So I want to say some words to both of you. We'll start with Zoharit.
Yes.
Zoharit, I think people who have heard me talk about a Wider Brunch know that I often say that one of the reasons I founded the organization was because I came to understand that there were voices in Israel that deserved to be heard, that there were stories that needed to be told. And when I say that, the person that I think about most often is you.
Oh, yeah.
I still remember the night that we first met almost 6 years ago, and I think a Wider Brunch at that point was just like a little glimmer in my eye. And I was so moved and inspired by your story and the story of all of the religious LGBT leaders in Israel that are working to make such profound change. And you and I have been able to do such great things together over the past years, both here and in Israel, and we've also built a beautiful friendship. And I've had the opportunity to watch you blossom into a leader, a political leader, a religious leader, the first ever out openly lesbian Orthodox Jew to run for the Knesset. Your leadership, you make things happen, you bring people together. It's a common understanding in Israel that when Zoharit asks you to do something, you just say yes. and I've learned that too. And it is my great honor to present you with our Gesher Award. It's honoring you for your partnership and your friendship in building lasting bridges of understanding and cooperation.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Arthur. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And anything would happen if Arthur wouldn't come to Israel and I meet him. So thank you, Arthur, very much. Thank you very much.
Anat, we often tell people that Israel is a really complicated place. And I don't know anyone more complicated and more multi-talented than you are. You are a feminist and an activist and a film festival director and a social media wizard, and you create the best parties for women anywhere in Israel, probably anywhere in the Middle East. And now you are on the board of the Agudah, Israel's leading LGBT organization, and you are working for great change on the ground. And you are fierce. We didn't use your fierce photo up there, but you are passionate and you are determined, and you always challenge us to resist the temptation to fall back into simple answers when we know the truth is more complicated. And so, as well, it is my honor to present you with this award, our Gesher Award as well. And you are a great friend and ally, and you make our work so much better. So thank you.
Thank you. I
just want to say thank you to Arthur and Ty and a Wider Bridge. I think the work you're doing is tremendously important, and I dearly thank you. Thank you.
Arthur? Wait, Arthur's a hurry. Now, you should get a photo first, no? We're good. You don't want a photo together? Yes, let's get a photo. We have to capture it. If there's no photo, it didn't happen, right? There we go. Yes, yes. Smile, yes. There you go. There you go. Great. Let's give it up again for Zaharit and Anat. Oh, I'm up there. I'm a little shiny, though. Okay. I'll deal with that at the break. So, before I welcome our next guest, Rabbi Doug Kahn, Executive Director of the San Francisco Jewish Community Relations Council, I've got a short video for you all that might make Doug blush a little. Let's take a look.
Doug is an ally in the truest sense of the word. We have seen this in his work with JCRC, opposing the Knight Initiative back in 2000, in supporting marriage equality, and also shining a light on the plight facing LGBT Russians over the last few years under Putin's regime. Because of Doug's work throughout the organized Jewish community, not just in the Bay Area, but nationwide, the needle has moved in ways that I would have never imagined when I came out as a 14-year-old kid many years ago.
We're fortunate, I think, to have Doug in the Bay Area because his initiatives and strategic thinking, and I think that's what's so incredible and what makes such a difference for our JCRC, but the impact on the community is immense, that it's a strategic approach to do whatever is necessary for our community, not what is done nationally, but what is taking place here and how do we address that the best through leadership, through mentoring, through just being Doug in all the things that he does, really changes the landscape of the Bay Area and their attitudes to Israel, and I think for that we're very fortunate.
I think that Israel is sometimes placed under microscopic examination in a way very few other nations are. And the reality is you can place any society under a microscope and see its warts and its problems, and they are real and they have to be addressed to try to improve the society. But at the same time, it doesn't give an accurate picture. It doesn't show the wonder. It doesn't show the contributions. It doesn't show the remarkable achievements of a nation that is so young as Israel is, facing the external threats that it has always faced. And so I think it's so important, including within the progressive community, to enlarge the lens. And that's something that JCRC works hard on doing, and I know that's something that a Wider Bridge works hard on doing. One thing that impresses me the most about a Wider Bridge is that whether it's with its delegations sent to Israel, its Israeli delegations visiting here, its educational and cultural events, is that it addresses issues and relationships with nuance, with an appreciation for the complexity, and through it there's an authenticity involved in building stronger bridges between Israel and the LGBT community. JCRC is an organization that very much tries to speak with nuance and appreciation for complexity. And so the work of a Wider Bridge resonates on every level for us, and we are strongly in support of that work.
All right, everybody, let's give a warm welcome for Rabbi Doug Kahn. So how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you so
fun?
much. I'm thrilled to be here with this amazing turnout of folks from the community supporting such an important organization, including many from within the JCRC family and beyond. So I'm thrilled.
All right. And you have the fun task of trying to convene everybody and representing the entirety of the Jewish community. That can't be easy.
Many have heard me say that in the 33 years I've been at JCRC, I'm still waiting for my first dull day, and that's one of the reasons. But the reality is that as a consensus-based organization, we are almost always able to arrive at a consensus on a key issue. The question is, where does that consensus lie? It can take us a week, it can take us a month, it can take us years to figure that out.
And I wondered, did you, JCRC was a longtime national and local leader on LGBTQ issues, especially opposing Prop 8 here in California, which sought to revoke marriage rights that were granted. And you organized the first Bay Area LGBT mission in Israel in 2006, 4 years before Wider Bridge. What helped you recognize the need for the Jewish community to be a voice for LGBT equality?
You know, I was thinking about my own journey when you asked the question. And the reality is that in rabbinical school in the late 70s, I did a paper on the ethics of homosexuality, addressing how do you balance what some of those tough texts are in the Bible with modern Jewish ethics. And I thought modern Jewish ethics won. And from there, I soon after came to JCRC, and immediately we were dealing with issues that related to discrimination in the LGBT community. Within months of being on the staff, the mayor had vetoed the first domestic partnership bill in San Francisco, ultimately to be resolved. And I learned through that lens, through that issue, how important these concerns were in terms of eliminating any vestiges of discrimination within the LGBT community. Fast forward a few years, and I was asked to be a straight rabbi on a LGBT task force of the United Way, addressing the issue of whether to continue funding the Boy Scouts of America and making the decision, the bold decision, not to because of its discrimination against gay youth. And from there, it was the Knight Initiative, which insisted that marriage was only between a man and a woman, which JCRC took up as the first consensus position on this related issue because we saw that it was not only about discrimination against gays and lesbians, it was about trying to create an atmosphere that was hateful against gays and lesbians. And this is something that has always concerned JCRC as an organization focused on the civil rights and discriminatory issues of its day. And the LGBT issue continued to emerge ultimately as the marriage equality is the defining civil rights issue of our day. And so JCRC could not do anything but speak out. And one of the things I think that's important to mention is when I speak out on an issue, when I had the privilege of speaking on the issue of marriage equality, I'm different in a way than pulpit rabbis who have freedom of the pulpit and can speak on any issue. I speak on those issues about which JCRC has reached consensus. So the fact that our diverse organization could take such a strong stand on marriage equality was not only a game changer, I think, in the community, but an enormous point of pride for all of us associated with the organization.
Wow. Well, I can say thank you for doing that work, because it definitely has been transformational to have the Jewish community and the religious community in general in California to be so vocal. So thank you for working to build consensus. Let's talk about Israel a little bit. You have been a tireless and articulate advocate for Israel. But why, we're in the Bay Area, and it's the hotbed of progressive activism, and is a strong movement here to boycott, impose divestments and sanctions against Israel. And you've been working very hard to oppose that. Why is the work so critical, especially here in the Bay Area?
You know, it's interesting. I'm a fourth generation San Franciscan. I love this city. I breathe this city. And one of the things that I've always loved about it and the area is its reputation for being so tolerant an environment. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons that the LGBT community has been so strong here for so many decades. And that has historically been true for the Jewish community as well. The founding director of our organization, Earl Rabb, and I'm also thrilled that Rita Semmel, my other mentor and my predecessor, is here with us today. But Earl came out on assignment from a magazine to study the unique aspects of the San Francisco Bay Area and concluded that it alone, among almost every major city in America, did not have the kind of historical institutionalized anti-Semitism. So to see today that in this environment that we celebrate for its tolerance and for its diversity, the kind of animosity and hatred that is increasingly directed towards supporters of Israel is profoundly disturbing, because that is in such sharp contrast with the historical picture of the Bay Area and such a discordant note. The reality is that in the Bay Area alone, we have about 130 organizations that support the BDS movement against Israel, which ultimately seeks the elimination of the State of Israel. It is an astonishing challenge, and we're all in it together to meet that challenge, whether we're seeing it on college campuses or in the cultural community or in public institutions or wherever it may lie. And this is not about criticism of Israeli government policies. We can have vigorous debate about all sorts of policies. Israel, like any country, is a real, living, breathing country with wonderful aspects and with important challenges as well. This is about whether we ultimately believe that Israel has a right to exist as a democratic and Jewish state, and that fight has been joined in the Bay Area in a way that we all, I think, have a stake in it.
All right. Are you hopeful that it's going in the right direction?
Well, you know, I'm a perennial optimist. I used to say I thought I was an optimist based on being a rational person. Now I'm an optimist because I won't let any extremists on the far sides of any issue take away that optimism from me. Okay. So by faith, I'm an optimist. Yeah. And obviously it is, and I appreciated that it was mentioned before, this is a difficult time for Israel right now, with yet another period of Israel's citizens worrying every day about the most mundane aspects of life and the tensions and the violence that can only set further back any prospects for peace. And yet I see no alternative but to continue to encourage every effort to ultimately obtain a peaceful resolution of the conflict. And until that day, I think we have to make sure that Israel is secure and strong and able to deal with the issues, external and internal, in ways that will position it to feel comfortable taking the risks for peace that inevitably it will be asked to take.
So, very quick. I don't want to stop the applause for you. Very quick question. What lesson do you think we can learn from Wider Bridge's work in engaging the LGBT community in Israel? Like a 30-second answer.
So
we have a commercial to go to. No.
I think a Wider Bridge does exceptional work under the leadership of Arthur, Ty, and all of the people involved. You know, we're a bridge-building organization. To deal with the complex issues, you first have to build relationships. Wider Bridge is a bridge-building relationship by definition. It is engaged in nuanced activism. It appreciates the complexities of Israeli life, and it engages them with a loving, positive, deep understanding and commitment. And I think that's what will foster deep and profound, lasting relationships between Israel and the LGBT communities here and there. You know, there's a lot of talk about Klal Yisrael, the sense that we are all responsible around the world, Jews one for another. Really, I think a Wider Bridge exemplifies what Klal Yisrael means every day. It is a model that all of us look to and are appreciative of.
Oh, wow. Well, Doug, I want to thank you for being an optimist and your great work. And I think Arthur wants to thank you as well. So, Arthur, thank you.
Doug, it's such a pleasure to be able to honor you today. You know, I know that over the next year or so, you are going to get a lot of awards and accolades, all very deserved in recognition of your over 3 decades of leadership of JCRC. And I don't want to repeat what others have already said here today, but I want to say this. We did not build a Wider Bridge on a blank canvas. That our organization has been able to grow and flourish here in the Bay Area. It's a testament to the kind of inclusive Jewish community that you have helped to build. It's a testament to the bonds between the Jewish and LGBT communities that you have helped to create. and also to the kind of thoughtful dialogue about Israel that you have promoted. So we understand, as we do our work, that we are standing on your shoulders. And we are very grateful for all of the leadership that you have brought to the community. I want to present you with this award, and I want to describe it a little bit to the people who can't see it. On one side, there is a rainbow mezuzah, which symbolizes the welcoming Jewish community that you have helped to build. And it honors you for both for your leadership and advocacy for Israel, as well as for the strong bonds you have worked to build between the Jewish and LGBT communities. And at the bottom is the Hebrew inscription, Even Ma'asu Habonim Chayita L'Rosh Pinah. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Doug, thank you for your leadership. Let's not forget the photo.
Just very briefly, I'm humbled, I am moved, and I am honored to receive this award from a Wider Bridge, and honored to share the honors today with my esteemed colleague, Anita Friedman. Thank you so much.
One last thing. We also have a special proclamation for you from the office of Senator Mark Leno.
Thank you, and thank you, Mark.
And another special treat for you. You have another song from Ido Politi. Ido.
Dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear the unbearable sorrow, and to run where the brave dare not go. לשאת את הצער הבכי, לצאת וברא להלום, לחבוק אהבות נעורינו, לנשוק לכוכב במרום. This is my quest to follow that star. Ooh, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question of pause, וללכת קדימה גם אם זהו שביל גיהנום. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, אז ליבי בשלווה לא ינום, מנוחת עולמים. העולם אז יהיה טוב יותר, לא בזכות האיש היפה תמיד, to reach the unbearable sorrow, to reach the unreachable, the unreachable, the unreachable star. Impossible dream. Ooh. Thank you very much. Thank you guys. תודה רבה. תודה רבה.
Give it up again for Ido. So we have another special guest for you, but before we do that, let's see another little video about the wonderful Dr. Anita Friedman. Uh-oh. That's okay.
When it comes to my mother's commitment to Israel, I think it's something that she was born with. I think it was in her blood. I never had the opportunity to meet my grandfather, but I've heard stories about back in the shtetl, back in the old country. He was a part of a youth Zionist council, and I don't think any of them could have imagined having an Israel, or having the Israel that we have today, and certainly the flourishing that has happened in that part of the world. But I think it's that personal background, that personal connection that she has that really drives her.
I think everyone that is queer that's ever volunteered or given money or had the benefit or need for services from JFCS, I think has felt this deep respect for who we are, and in a way that feels just embracing without the word queer or LGBT or just coming up. It's just what this agency is about, and that's really what Anita has committed to.
In 1979, I just finished social work school, and I wanted to get involved in the Jewish community because my parents are Holocaust survivors. We came to this country with nothing, having lost everyone, just me and my parents, and I understood that it was important to rebuild the Jewish community, so I got a job at Jewish Family and Children's Services. And I understood very quickly, especially during the AIDS crisis, when so many people were coming for help and weren't able to really feel included in the community because the community, especially the leadership of the community, didn't recognize that that was something that affected Jewish people, as remarkable as that seems right now. When I started to work at Jewish Family and Children's Service, I started to see how diverse the community was, and that we had to find a way to make everyone feel included. That if you really want to build a Jewish community, a strong and a vibrant Jewish community, you need to make sure that every person feels like they play a role, every person feels valued, every person feels like they have a home in this community. And that's really the role of Jewish Family and Children's Services, and that's really what I learned when I first started here. I was especially excited to understand that Wider Brunch was born, and a Wider Brunch had that same mission, because the Wider Brunch does things in the community that no other organization does. It puts on the agenda an issue that I think really needs to be higher up on the communal agenda, especially the connection between U.S. Jewry and Israel, which is, I think, one of the greatest threats to the Jewish people now, is that parting of the ways. And so the Wider Brunch, to me, is a top priority for us to work with, and I am very impressed with a small organization that's just formed working with the oldest charitable organization in the Western United States, which is JFCS, both sharing a common cause.
So now please join me in welcoming another community champion, Dr. Anita Friedman. Hello.
You are so good at this.
Oh.
Don't you think?
Stop.
You know?
But go on. No.
You know, my profession is about asking people questions. And you're really, really talented.
Oh, thank you.
There's a future for you on national television.
Anybody out there can make that happen? No. But it's really about you.
Oh, it is. It's all about me.
It's about you.
I say that all the time. It's just about me, you know.
I must say, so thinking about you, watching the video just really moved. You talking the story about coming together for people with AIDS and HIV.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how the LGBT community became to be a key part of the work at Jewish Family and Children's Services?
I was thinking about that when I did the video and I was watching the video and when I was coming here today, because one of the first cases that I handled myself, I'm a social worker and a clinical psychologist, gave me a real lesson in what the challenges were that the community faces and what we need to do going forward. And we've come a long way. But this was a case, this was in the early 80s, and I was a younger social worker of a woman who came to San Francisco. She was referred to Jewish Family and Children's Services by her doctor. And she was coming from Florida, and she found out that her son was gay and dying at the same time. And she was all alone, and she was an observant Jew, and she came to the community. She had no one, she was all alone, and she was referred to us. As it turned out, she thought her son was going to die in about 6 weeks. It turned out that he took 6 months. Wow. So she was in the community by herself for all that time. But what did the community do? It was just an amazing experience. At first, when we wanted to go to get funding to provide these services at that early stage, some of the funding sources said this is not a Jewish issue. And they weren't willing to fund it. And we decided we have to make sure she gets taken care of. This is a big issue for our community. Volunteers came forward and they met with her and they went with her to the hospital and she didn't have to be by herself and they brought her kosher food and she wasn't alone on the weekends and they took care of her all the way through, and when he died, they were the people who were with her at the funeral. And when she got back to Florida, she wrote me a letter. And I brought the letter with me because I keep it in my purse.
Wow.
I keep this letter in my purse. Wow. And the reason I keep it in my purse is that sometimes when I feel like I'm a little down and I'm losing heart, I read this letter and it gives me strength. Because these are not easy times in the world, for Israel, in the community, for many people. But she wrote this letter and she included this little poem, and it says, "There is a light in this world, a healing spirit, more powerful than anything we can imagine. Sometimes we lose sight of this when there is suffering or too much pain. But then that light emerges through the lives of ordinary people who hear a call and answer in extraordinary ways." Thank you. For me, that's a letter to, not just to me, that's a letter to all of us, to all the people in this room, most of whom I know and have been working with for the last 36 years. I mean, I've been in this job for 36 years. I always say to people, it's like, I don't think Jews have nuns, but I took my vows 36 years ago. So I'm kind of like a nun, except I have 3 kids. But whatever.
Yeah. Sorry. I wasn't expecting that. That was good. Okay, I'm sorry. I gotta give it. Okay. Like, what would Oprah do? No, so as you were telling this story, I
Yeah.
actually was reflecting on a friend of mine who didn't understand why my generation didn't get more involved with HIV and AIDS advocacy. And he
Right.
told me 1 year, 20 of his friends dying.
Mm.
And that made me get more involved in the issue. So just hearing that story, I can understand how it
Yeah.
would have a big impact on
Yeah.
you. And kudos to you for taking that charge and keeping that story with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And similarly, you are a light in many communities, but also in the progressive community, progressives in general. And you've been a voice in helping us understand that there need not be a contradiction between our progressive values and your love for Israel. A message that a Wider Bridge first shared with me on my mission in Israel in 2014, and it's been helping me to be able to, has been a resource for me as I've been going through my own journey in that respect. What would you share about this question, this contradiction, or how would you help people not have the contradictions, what I'm going to say?
I think that your experience is the experience that needs to be shared with lots and lots of people who are key decision makers and policy makers and thought leaders like you are. I've been involved also in AIPAC, which is, I think, the preeminent organization really trying to build bridges along with a wider bridge with the progressive community. As a matter of fact, I'm on my way to Israel tonight with a group of leadership from the progressive community from nationally with AIPAC. Because
Tonight?
Tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, are you busy?
I have a bag back there.
Do you?
Let's go.
You know, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
fun. It's good there. you know.
Yes.
So there's no way for people to really understand what Israel stands for, the truth about Israel, unless you go there, as I think you understand from your own personal experience. So that really has to be a critical part of how we go about connecting the United States and the progressive community with Israel. Israel stands for the same things that we stand for. It stands for the value of every human life. It stands for democracy. It stands for freedom. It stands for, well, it finds itself on the fighting front lines of the democratic world. So everything that's important to us is important to Israel. Somehow Israel has been scapegoated and misunderstood, and we understand what the reasons are for that. And the only way to combat it is to have organizations like this and have people like you and have people like everyone in this room really working to help people to understand better that Israel stands for everything that we believe in.
Yeah. So something that I've been looking into lately around this topic is actually President Barack Obama has an interesting analysis about how he, for a long time, has rooted his support for Israel in a social justice framework.
Right.
And I think that has been helpful along with a wider bridge. I'm glad that you're doing this work.
Yeah.
On a lighter note, who's Uncle Solomon?
Who's Uncle Solomon? Everybody here knows Uncle Solomon, don't you?
And I just made up a rumor in my head that he's gay. Is he?
You know, Arthur raised that issue with me, and now I'm starting to connect the dots here. And certain things are becoming clear to me that I didn't fully understand before.
Yes.
So, there's something to this. Uncle Solomon is the repository of all human knowledge, basically.
Oh.
He's my real Uncle Solomon.
Oh.
He lives in Borough Park. He's an Orthodox Jew. But he has this tremendous wisdom. So I often share that wisdom with all my friends here who are now part of the family, as are you.
All right. I'll be over for Shabbat.
Yeah. That's good because it's a big party.
Yeah, right.
When I told him I was coming here for this wonderful event, and I explained to him what was happening, and that this is about inclusion, it's about valuing every person, understanding that every human being is made in the image of God. And he has a deep understanding about why it's important to be inclusive in the way that we understand it. And he told me this story, which I'll share with you briefly.
Please.
It's a Hasidic story, but it's about how it can end up being very lonely for a person if they start to exclude everybody else. So he said, in the Hasidic community, they sometimes say that the world is basically divided. There's the Jews and there's everybody else. Okay? And And then, so we don't have to deal with everybody else. And then among the Jews, there's the Bobover Hasidim, and there's this Lubavitch Hasidim, and there's the Satmar and the Gerer. And, but you know that our rabbi, the Bobover Rebbe, is really the only really good rabbi. So forget about all the other people. And actually, among us, Hasidim, there's the really learned people, like you and me, who really study. And then there's everybody else who, you know, they live their lives, they study, they come to a Verbringen. A Verbringen is like when everybody gets together to have a good time. But they don't really know very much. So forget about them. And then, actually, among the scholars, you and me, well, you know how little you know. So, you know, when you start to exclude everybody, you could end up being pretty lonely.
That's great. And for the record, Uncle Solomon is not gay.
We don't know that.
We don't know yet. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right, exactly. But I'll let you know next year.
All right. Well, Anita, I can tell that you'll be so much fun at Shabbat dinner next Friday. And it was an honor talking with you. Thank you all. But before you go, but wait, there's more.
Is there more?
Arthur has something for you as well.
Do you?
Yes.
Please join me here, Anita. Anita, it is such an honor to be on stage here with you today and to be able to give you this award.
Thank you.
You know, we just heard earlier that beautiful version of the impossible dream. But you know, not all dreams are impossible. A strong and secure Israel was once a dream. A Bay Area Jewish community that is really welcoming and inclusive of LGBT people, that was once a dream. For many same-sex couples, the ability to adopt a child and have a family was once a dream. So I think you have been in the business for the last few decades of transforming dreams into reality.
Thank you.
And that's not easy. That takes courage and wisdom and leadership and strength. And you bring all of that and much more to your leadership at JFCS, to your advocacy for Israel, to all of the community projects, both here in the Bay Area and Israel, that you devote so much of your life to. And it is such an honor to be able to give you this recognition today. So we have this award for you. It also has a rainbow mezuzah on it. It honors you both for your work and support and service to the LGBT community, as well as for your steadfast commitment to Israel and for welcoming progressive voices into the Israel conversation. And at the bottom is a Hebrew inscription that I think you are very familiar with. It says, Chazak, Chazak, we need Chazek. Be strong, and may we strengthen one another.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And for you as well, we also have a proclamation from Senator Leno in the California State Senate.
Thank you, Mark, my hero. The last thing that Uncle Solomon said to me when I told him I was going to be here is he said, you know, it's very nice, Anita, but remember, if you were ever credited with some success, remember that you haven't walked that path alone. So thank you, everybody, and God bless you.
Well, everyone, as sad as I'm...
Vincent, we're not quite done yet.
No, but it says right here we're done.
No, we're not done. We got a couple more things.
Oh, okay,
and
I'll sit back.
need Arthur back out to join me so we can do that.
Let's do it.
Here he goes. So, Arthur, first of all, I want to thank you for giving us the chance to honor Doug and Anita in front of their community, in front of our community, for all the wonderful work they've done. They are a blessing to us. And second of all, I want to tell you, it's been a phenomenal Wider Brunch. But not perfect, because something's missing. And that something is the chance for us to recognize you. enthusiastic group, and certainly well-deserved. Arthur, you know how much we respect your work at the Federation and across this community. Many of you probably know that Arthur was awarded the Israel in Our Hearts Prize for all of the wonderful work he's done on positive engagement with Israel. We at the Federation are proud to be among the earliest supporters of Wider Bridge because Wider Bridge has brought engagement with Israel, service to the LGBT community, and innovation into this community of ours. And let me just end right there and say that at this moment in time in this community, we love to honor entrepreneurs. Most of them love to talk about how they're changing the world. Some of them are. This one really is. Arthur Slepian, thank you so much. So now, I think he's blushing sufficiently that you can probably roll.
Great.
Thank you.
Give it up for Arthur one more time. Well, I love Arthur also, and I will say, it was in the year, a little over a year that I've known him, he's become a great friend, and he has a great sense of humor, and I'm amazed at what he's built with his organization. And I hope today you got to learn a little bit of why a Wider Bridge is close to my heart. It's brought me closer to Israel and to the Jewish people. It's also an important voice strengthening the queer community around the world. But that's all for me today. Thank you all for tuning into the show. I'd like to call out another amazing member of the Wider Bridge team and a good friend, Ty Gregory, say a few words. Thank you all.
How about the fabulous Vincent Jones, ladies and gentlemen? You might have booked yourself an annual gig, my friend. So I stand between you and the exit, so let me just tell a brief story. One that is unique to Israel, but also deeply familiar to LGBT people here across North America. About a year ago, on our 2014 mission, we were at Yachad, Zehorit's shul, and we were sitting down for Shabbat dinner with some incredible members of her community. I want to tell the story of one member in particular. His name is Yaniv, and today he's one of the leaders of Kala, the Ethiopian-Israeli LGBT organization. A few years ago, Yaniv was in Tel Aviv, where he now lives, and he looked around. And yes, there's a gay boom and strollers, and there's gay cafes and nightclubs. The nightclubs are nice. And he loved it, but he didn't see many people that looked like him. And in his hometown of Ramla, one of the centers of Ethiopian-Israeli life, he wouldn't dare express himself as an out person in the culturally traditional community. But Yaniv knew that visibility matters. So online he began advertising meetups in Tel Aviv, and it took a while, but eventually people started showing up. 2, 3, 8 people, 16, and eventually scores of young LGBT Ethiopian Israelis started coming together in what began as a support organization for a group marginalized in Israeli society became a group working towards empowerment, standing up to be seen and heard in Israel. And last June, on our 2015 mission, we had the privilege, our Wider Bridge mission, of marching and dancing and waving banners next to more than 30 members of Kala. But that's not where the story ends, because our online magazine at widerbridge.org did an interview of Yaniv about Kala's work around the same time as Pride 2015, and the story made its way all the way to Ethiopia. And local LGBT activists read about Yaniv's work and Kala's work. This is a country, by the way, where it's not only taboo to be gay, it can be dangerous. And they were fascinated by what was happening in Israel. And a few weeks ago, he traveled there, and he met with local activists, and he shared their work of empowerment and visibility and community organizing so that they too might have a chance for a more hopeful future. Next spring, a Wider Bridge is bringing Kala to North America, to tour cities across the states, to share their work, build relationships with North American LGBT communities and their leaders, build collaborations so that we might grow stronger together. And we know that with leaders not only of Kala, but leaders we've brought over the years, like Anat and Zehorit and so many others, that wherever we take them, LGBT people are seeing a new side of Israel based on shared experience. You know, a Wider Bridge is about Israel advocacy, but it's about Israel advocacy that is inherently personal rather than political. We all know that it can be easy to reject the complicated politics of Israel. Sometimes two parties is a headache in our country. They have 14 at least, and we have a left-right spectrum. They have at least 5 or 6 different spectrums in the Knesset. We know that it can be easy to reject the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the quagmire of today's Middle East, especially in difficult days like today. But what's incredibly difficult to reject are stories of inspiring people standing up and creating a better life for themselves, their communities, and their country. And Israel happens to be that country where these stories are possible. That is how a Wider Bridge and its missions and its programs are changing hearts and minds about Israel. That's how we're engaging progressives with Israel. And that is how we're making sure that LGBT people in this country have a stake in Israel's future. That's how together we're building a Wider Bridge. So, in the center of your table are some bright orange envelopes. We didn't pick the color by accident, by the way. I encourage you to join our movement. Stand up with our sponsors, like the Corette Foundation, Walter Leeson, and all the incredible people that made this possible today. And join our movement in whatever way you can. I want to thank all of you for showing up, for standing up for Israel, for standing up for Israel advocacy, and we know we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much, and have a great Sunday.
היא מרגישה שנפתח לה מזל, פגשה אחד גבר ורז'ל, והיא תלחש לו